I'm going to show you a little something interesting. I did this too long. I did it for 7 hours, and I should have done it for maybe, let's say, 6. You can see debris on the surface. That's silver debris. But worst of all, there's debris right down there in the bottom corner. First of all, there's the Tyndall effect. So it shows you there's a lot of particles in the water. You see the debris? Let's see if we can get a different angle here. You see? It's sitting right here in the bottom. All this silver piled up. Particles of silver. Oops. So yeah, it's not turning into mud yet, but it's all falling to the bottom. So 7 hours was way too long. It's right there. If I can point at it. It's right there. It's right there at the bottom in the corner there. Anyway, I wanted to show you what happens. So now when I add the hydrogen peroxide, you can imagine what's going to happen next. Let's see, where is it? Here it is. My little 10th ounce gold Krugerrand, which I incorporate now into the procedure of the first step when I make the colloidal silver. This is the termination, or the end of the first step, is just making colloidal silver. I put the Krugerrand down at the inside, you know, away from the magnetic stirring bar, away from it a little bit, and then I immerse my electrodes, my 4 silver electrodes, into the water. You can see how nice and black they are. And they fit over the top here, and they go right in the water, and I put my Krugerrand down in there, and then I got my appliance timer, and I set it for 7 hours, but it was too long, so I reset it for 6. So now I'm going to add hydrogen peroxide food grade, 35% strength. I'm going to add 30 cc's. Now yesterday, I think it was 6 hours, 1.5 of these, around 45 cc's would have been okay, but I had put in 62 of these scoops, waiting a few hours between them, and that was too much, the second dose. But now, with all that debris, I don't know. I'm trying to find the right time frame, because when you put a Krugerrand in the bottom, it kind of acts like the equivalent of having an electrolyte in there, in which the processing time is reduced. And I guess it makes it easier for the electricity to go through the water, to find a pathway through the water, because there's a piece of metal in the water. In any case, whatever it is, the reason is it does speed up the processing time, and I figured, well, you know, maybe it'll homeopathically put some gold and copper in the water. It might put more than a homeopathic dosage, I don't know, although it looks like it's mainly silver, but how would I know? Well, you know, there's a different color to it. I felt it was more of an orange color, although right now it doesn't look orange at all. It just looks like it's got a lot of floating debris on the surface there. And you can see there's a lot of the floating debris, the smaller particles that are congregated in the center of that vortex. But that's what's floating, and then there's the debris that sank. So I'm gonna set up the camera in a tripod and add the hydrogen peroxide, and you'll see, really see how debris laden this has become. Alright, here we go. Take my 30 cc's. I'm going to pour it right over here. I don't want to spill. Make a mess on the table, might as well make a mess in the beaker. So that's 30 cc's. Normally it turns brown first. It's taking a while to turn brown. No, it's not even turning brown. Yeah, it's not responding the same way. I literally have let it go too long, or else I wouldn't have so much debris. So it's somewhere, the ideal time frame is, like 5 hours, whereas before, without the Krugerrand, I was spending 9 hours. And I thought, oh no, something's wrong here. Well, yeah, so I put the Krugerrand in now, and it takes far less time. Get a different shot here. So I still got debris on the surface, but I don't know if you can hear the bubbling. Oh, well, the debris is gone from here. It's not even there anymore. So it's processing the debris. So that's going to remain a solid white of effervescence. Oh, the surface is gone now. And I'm going to wait an hour. So maybe 7 hours is okay. It seemed like a tremendous amount. I was trying to make this a dense quantity of silver. And when you add the hydrogen peroxide, it's so efficient that it removes that kind of thing from the water. It's got a little gray tint to it, I think, but mostly it's white. So this might be the right quantity of time. 7 hours might be just the right amount of excess of silver. Because I'm, trying to make enough silver hydroperoxide to fill a 30-gallon bathtub in a tiny little 2-liter beaker, because I want to conserve my use of distilled water and conserve my use of human-grade 99.9% pure MSM, and what else? Eliminate the use of an aquarium pump, which is normally what you use for this $800 SilverGen Pro 7 colloidal silver device from silvergen.com. 5-6 gallon tub in a plastic container. I want to avoid all plastic at these 2 steps or stages of the procedure of making this recipe. And I also want to avoid plastic in the bathtub as well, for that matter. I stopped using my snorkel to immerse my face in the water. Because I hesitate, since I'm using the horse-grade MSM, I hesitate to bring plastic into the situation. So the use of horse-grade MSM has forced me to bypass the normal procedure and instead do things a little differently, which in effect has made things more efficient. It's prompted me to be more efficient about this. So I've got the time reduced to 7 hours, but the quantity of silver is humongous. And it's all because of that little piece of Krugerrand that I put in the water that speeds things up. So I'm producing a heck of a lot of silver in the solution. And since it's in a concentrated beaker, the hydrogen peroxide can more efficiently process that silver. If this were a 5-gallon tub, but the same quantity of silver, it would be more difficult for the hydrogen peroxide to do its job and react with the silver particles. But in a confined space, where can the silver go to run away from the molecules of hydrogen peroxide? It can't go very far. So the hydrogen and the stirring is more vigorous. So all in all, making the batches of silver hydroperoxide in a smaller containment area or space is far more efficient and does the job very, very well. So this is the way to do it. So I think I'm going to go back to 7 hours, because I think this is going to be a perfect quantity of various oxides of silver. So we'll see in an hour or so's time, when the effervescence diminishes, how cloudy is it, you know. When you're left with a white cloud, you wonder, well, is that effervescence remaining, or is that particles of silver oxide, various oxides of silver floating around? With the 5 or 6 hours, I didn't get that. I still got little tiny bubbles of effervescence lingering, even after the second dose, making it 60 total of cc's, 60 cc's of hydrogen peroxide, 35% strength. Food grade, it has to be food grade. It cannot have anything in it that would get in the way of processing. Anywho, I thought I'd show you my most updated stage of processing colloidal silver. Now, it's good to repeat a few other pointers, and that is, okay, so I made the colloidal silver, I'm adding the hydrogen peroxide, and then when I get done I will add 1 or 2 spoonfuls, and by spoonful I mean a plastic spoonful, of 99.9% pure human grade MSM, not intended for horses. Just the minimum, the bare minimum, to stabilize the mixture. And then I will take a full scoop, and I'm talking big size Pillsbury Doughboy scoops. I want to rinse out this scooper here of horse grade MSM that I keep in a bucket here, and I'll put it directly into the bathtub and fill up the bathtub, and then I'll put some cloves in the bathtub, but not cayenne pepper. I've developed this other technique in which this time of year, this is what is this? This is August, around mid-August. So between the summer solstice and the winter solstice is the time of the lunar path. If we should die in this time of year, it's not too favorable in our afterlife, because we die at a time when the sun is waning. The day, the number of hours or minutes, the number of minutes to the day of daylight is waning. And so Charlie Lutz would say the soul goes the path of the lunar path if the person should die during this half of the year, between the summer solstice and the winter solstice. Well, on account of this time of year, I have my ceiling fan with my convex mirrors. You can see them right there. They're both top and bottom on the blades, spinning opposite to the spin of the Earth. So this is clockwise, as seen from below, and I'm in the northern hemisphere. So if we move this to the North Pole, and imagine, we'll just imagine this is the Earth, and we're underneath the South Pole. Does it spin this way to make the sun rise in the east? No, it would spin the other way. And so this is the left-hand path, is what the lunar path is. It's being contrary to nature. And so, likewise, I'm being contrary to my instinct, because normally with silver you take cayenne pepper. You don't take cloves, you take something heating, and cayenne pepper is traditional anyway. So I chose to take the opposite, cloves, because it's cooling. And this is the lunar path half of the year in which I want to do the opposite. I want to settle down and relax. And of course cloves is anti-parasitic for the egg stage of the parasite's life cycle. But be that as it may, the cloves efficiently embodies the opposite of what is normal, what you would normally do in conjunction with silver to help the body absorb the silver. So instead of taking cayenne pepper, I do the opposite. Instead of heating the body, I cool it. And this is, summer. So summer and fall, I'm cooling the body. So it makes sense to use cloves, yet it has not been traditional. But when we think about it, in terms of this half of the year, it's the normal thing to do. Now, when the winter solstice commences, up until the summer solstice, I'm going to switch back to cayenne pepper during winter and spring. But during summer and fall, I use cloves. So I've got 3 different things now in which I alternate biannually along the lines of this solstice transition of the 2 halves of the year. The solar path of winter and spring and the lunar path of summer and fall. So I have cloves during the lunar path and cayenne during the solar path. And then I reverse direction on the ceiling fan. I'm in the northern hemisphere in Southern California, and so right now it's spinning clockwise as seen from below during this lunar path half of the year. But in the solar path half of the year, I'll spin it counterclockwise as seen from below. In other words, with the spin of the Earth, not contrary to the spin of the Earth, but with it, to augment, to add to the spin of the Earth, because that's augmenting the the waxing of the sun. It's augmenting the spin of the Earth and helping to add to the spin of the Earth rather than detract from it. And then the third thing I do is I have a circuit. I have right now connected the negative pole of my sleep circuit underneath the bed to my conductive earthing pillowcase. I also have this grounded to the earth outside, but I have my sleep circuit of 1 AA battery and 66 count 100 mega ohm resistors each, 100 mega ohms each of 66 of them connected in series to create 6.6 giga-ohms of resistance, so that if I had connected the other end of the sleep circuit to my feet, as well as the other polar opposite end of the circuit to my head, I would be able to measure, if I had a measuring device sensitive enough, I would have measured 200 picoamps passing through the body, but I don't want amperage passing through the body, so I leave one end disconnected, the feet end, and I connect instead only my head end, which is also connected in parallel to the earth ground outside, to a grounding rod buried in the earth. But the circuit is connected, the negative end of the circuit is connected to my head right now, because that's the opposite of the voltage mapping of the body according to Leon Ernest Eman, Biocircuitry, Cooperative Healing, the book he wrote, and, Biocircuitry was written by Leslie and Terry Patton, Patten, but Cooperative Healing was written by Leon Ernest Eman, and he mapped the voltage gradient of the body, positive in the head, negative at the pelvis. And Dr. Robert O. Becker, in his book The Body Electric, mapped positive at the head and more negative at the pelvic region and more negative at the ends of the limbs, at the feet and hands. So they both corroborate the voltage mapping of the body. And if you want to induce relaxation, that normally with a battery-oriented circuit, not a human-oriented circuit, you put the positive end of the battery-operated circuit at the head and negative at the feet. But I do the opposite, because this is the lunar path phase of the year, of the cycle of the year, the waning of the influence of the sun. The days are getting shorter. So I put the negative of the battery-oriented sleep circuit at the head, and I leave the positive disconnected underneath the bed, so no current will go through my body. Come winter solstice, I'll reverse it. I'll put the positive lead of the circuit at my head and leave the negative disconnected. So that's the third area in which I embody this idea that the Earth goes through a phase that's a year long two phases, two halves, a solar half and a lunar half, a waxing of the sun and a waning of the sun. And the other is which direction do I spin the convex mirrors attached below and above on both bottom side and top side of the blades of the ceiling fan. They have to be convex mirrors, and you'll have to go to my look up the channel. I did a specific channel for aetheric weather engineering. That's the name of it, aetheric weather engineering on YouTube, which I go into that more. So that's this, but that's this second instance of biannual switching, and then of course the third is which herb do I use in the bath? Do I use cloves during the lunar path half of the year, or do I use cayenne pepper, powdered? But anyway, this video was all about my latest development of how I make silver hydroperoxide for the bath. Now, of course, when I make it for oral hygiene, for my water pick, I don't do it this way. But I do it very similarly. I use a smaller beaker, a liter-sized beaker, which does not use silver plates. It uses silver wire. You can see the wire coming down from the stopper here, and that's the magnetic stirrer running around. But I put my Krugerrand down inside, and I run it on a different machine, my $200 unit from Colloidal Silver, what's it called? colloidalsilver-supply.com. I think that's what it is. I got it through Amazon. That's what it's sitting on right now because it has a magnetic stirrer. The other $800 unit, the Silver Gen Pro 7, does not have a magnetic stirrer because, you know, you were supposed to use the aquarium pump inside the 5-gallon plastic container, but that's not going to work. So, and that's the one with the big silver plate electrodes that I attached to this piece of cardboard here. And this is a borosilicate 2-liter size beaker that I got online for $50 some odd. So I assembled all the parts of this from equipment I had sitting around. You know, I had this sitting. I didn't know what I was going to use the beaker for. I didn't really need to use borosilicate because I was going to use this for a different experiment. I was going to boil water. Oh yeah, I was going to boil a Krugerrand. That was it. But now I've modified it. I don't boil the Krugerrand. I just leach, homeopathically leach the gold and copper from the Krugerrand, the 10th ounce Krugerrand that I put at the bottom of the beaker when I process the distilled water to make colloidal silver. So that's my procedure, and the most updated version of how I make for the colloidal silver hydrogen peroxide. Oh, actually, when I make it in that liter-sized beaker, I do not process it with hydrogen peroxide because, well, let me put it this way. I make this for two different ways. One way is for the oral hygiene. I process it with hydrogen peroxide, and I put in the full amount, 1 tablespoon of human grade 99.9% MSM. But when I want to do wound care, I do not process it with hydrogen peroxide, and I just filter it through a coffee filter paper, and then afterwards it turns this deep yellow, which of course is normal for very densely made colloidal silver. And this is for wound care. And then I stir in a spoonful of human grade MSM, so it has some MSM for wound care. So I have 3 different styles on how I make silver solution, depending on how I'm going to use it. Either in the bath, in the oral hygiene, the water pick for oral hygiene, my little water pick here. And for wound care, which is basically, right now at the moment, my penis regeneration or foreskin regeneration experiments, in which I soak a piece of cloth, a round piece, 5-inch diameter piece of cloth, in the colloidal silver, which has not been processed with hydrogen peroxide, and there's no herbs, but there is a spoonful, a tablespoon of MSM, human grade, 99.9% pure MSM. Now I'm experimenting with a lotion to seal a wound, because I made an owie on my knuckle here by mistake, or by accident 2 days ago. And I made a lotion using a recipe online that contains half a cup of oil, a quarter cup of distilled water, quarter teaspoon of borax, you heard me correctly, sodium borate, tetraborate, and a tablespoon of beeswax. So the oil becomes emulsified. You heat up the oil with the beeswax so the beeswax melts into the oil, and then you add the borax to the water, the warm water, and then you use a hand blender, a stick blender, to blend the ingredients together. And then my stick blender is over here. So this is my stick blender, my hand blender, stick blender, there's different names for it. So, and here's my block of beeswax that I bought 3 years ago. I'm using up my beeswax finally. I found a use for it. So I made this lotion to put on my owie. Oh, but the water was not distilled water. It was colloidal silver water. Now, unfortunately, it turned black when I added the borax and heated it up. So obviously the silver came out of solution and blackened the solution, and so I'm not so sure how much silver is actually in this. I'm going to try tweaking the recipe to see if I can't make improvements. This was grapeseed oil, because I want to use it up. That's the only... well, I had apricot kernel oil, which was the main oil that the recipe called for, but I didn't want to use it. I wanted to use up my grapeseed oil. So it's greasy, and only a teeny-weeny dab will do you. But see, I've got a scab there. Now when I take a bath today in this hydrogen peroxide version of silver solution, it will eat away at the scab and hopefully turn it a bright pink again. And then I'll put the lotion on immediately. I didn't do that yesterday because I hadn't made the lotion yet, so it had a chance of developing into a scab. It's slightly infected, not too bad. You can see it's a little pink surrounding the wound, and that shows and it's slightly elevated, which shows that it's slightly infected, but not a whole lot, because it's sealed. Because I keep sealing it with wax. At first, I sealed it with just plain beeswax, and that was interesting. Hot melted beeswax kind of hurt, but I didn't think it was very efficient. I'm trying to put my hydrogen peroxide back in the fridge where it belongs to keep it nice and cool. So I thought I need to come up with a lotion, something that emulsifies the wax in a water base, and so that I can put silver into the wax. I wanted, because I'm trying to follow the dictates of the article on the National Institute of Health website that I read that talks about embedding silver into beeswax and putting it on the inside of plastic containers to sterilize the food inside that container to kill germs. So I thought, oh, that would be perfect for wound care. But putting beeswax directly on a wound, it falls off, although it leaves a little residual film of beeswax sealing the wound and keeping the wound nice, bright pink, because we want to prevent the wound from closing. But it was kind of laborious, painful to keep putting melted beeswax on a wound, and the wax keeps falling off. So I thought if I made a lotion, it might work better. And so this is my first attempt in that regard. So these are all the updates. Now I think you're up to date on my experiments with silver.